Martin, we appreciate the super chat contribution. Thank you so much for that. Love the show. Keep up the good work, guys. I have to say, it is a rebuild. We could not match up with Alabama or Georgia. How long will it take us? A rebuild. That's pretty strong language.
Yeah, Martin, I don't know that I would say that it's a complete rebuild. I think the biggest concern is on the defensive and offensive lines. I think Oklahoma's um, before I say rebuild, I'd like to just see what this product looks like this next year. Um, Now, I think when you look at the national championship game, when you watch Alabama and you watch Georgia, yeah, Oklahoma's not real close from what it seems that the product that they put out this year based on what that looks like. So, I would say Martin, you're maybe a couple 2 or 3 years away from having maybe the same guys that you see on Georgia's defensive line, on Alabama's defensive line. Alabama's not huge, but they've got a couple of really good ones. But you got Georgia, you got Jordan Davis, you got Wyatt, you've got a bunch of those guys that are really, really strong, really good, a lot of experience, and I think part of it, Martin, is the type of player that Oklahoma's going to have. The type of player that Grinch recruited isn't necessarily what Oklahoma needs going into the SEC, but I think what I'm most interested in is looking to see um, how Schmitty is able to really kind of transform some of those bodies next year and see what that looks like on the defensive line.
Servant is saying that the schedule next year should be interesting. Now, I don't know if he's just alluding to a transition to the SEC and obviously a whole new schedule, which will be fascinating because I'm looking at the 22 schedule and I'm not seeing anything out of the ordinary. Of course, Oklahoma is going to play everybody in the Big 12. And certainly Jason and I have months and months and months and months, and we'll do a full breakdown of the 22 schedule. I know UTEP and Kent State, there are a couple of pesky group of five programs that shouldn't give Oklahoma too much problem, but they are on the upswing. And then a trip to Nebraska, which I just looked over Nebraska. The Big Ten did a revision of its schedule, so I just did a Nebraska schedule review. That's going to be Oklahoma's first visit to Lincoln since 2009. And of course, they won a 23-16 game against the Huskers last year.
Yeah, I think Mark, it's very similar schedule wise for Oklahoma this year or this upcoming 2022 season, I should say. You've got obviously two very, very winnable games to start off with, and then you've got a Nebraska team that was, I mean, they were so close so many times this year. In typically you see that trajectory when a team is so close. Once they find a way to win one or two of these close games, then it kind of starts taking off. I love the Casey Thompson addition for Nebraska. I think he's going to be a a much better option than Adrian Martinez. I think they've recruited really well. They've got some good stuff in the portal, so I think that's going to be interesting. But like I said, overall, the Big 12 schedule is good for Oklahoma this year. You've got Oklahoma State coming to Norman, you've got Baylor coming to Norman, you go to Iowa State. But I think the schedule sets up pretty well for them as well this year. I mean, obviously it was good for them this past year, and it didn't come to fruition. But I think whether you call this a reload, a rebuild, where Oklahoma's at, I don't think that we know. And that's what's. I mean, I'm going to go off on a little sidebar here. These way too early top 25 predictions. It's so. And I mean, they've done these are out there historically, but it almost makes no sense to do it before the spring games even happen because there's so much movement now, more so than they ever were before. But because I've seen Oklahoma top 10, and I've seen some of them at the bottom of the top 25. You just don't know what this roster is going to look like, come March, April timeframe. So yeah, we'll get into that, but it looks like, and I think it'll be an exciting game for the fans. Nebraska was, it was this past year, and then it'll be, you'll have more of the excitement on the Nebraska side getting to host Oklahoma for this year. But like I said, whether you look at this as a rebuild, a reload, where Oklahoma's at different positions, I think they still, based on the schedule, will have a good chance to compete for the Big 12 championship again.
The one aspect of the schedule that I find interesting, I don't agree with it. I don't know if there's an explanation for it. The Oklahoma State game is not the last game of the season. It's at Texas Tech. Oklahoma State is the second to last game of the season.
Yeah, that is strange. I don't know why that is, and certainly there's time if they wanted to readjust that they could. But yeah, it's traditionally been almost every year here over the last 10-15 years that game has been the last game of the season. So yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard any reasons or recommendations on why that was the case, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see that move, because it makes more sense to be the last game of the year. The only thing that I would say is, unless you're in a situation where you want to try to maybe avoid playing the same team in back-to-back weeks, if
Yeah.
that's the only thought that I could think of.
That's the same thought I had, which is sending a message to Texas Tech that we do not expect you to play in the Big 12 championship game.
Right. Well, that could very well be the case as well, for sure.
Let's see. Yes, the chat is full of Caleb Williams talk and a few people chiming in that they're sick of Caleb Williams and want Oklahoma talk, and I can certainly understand that.
Yeah, I mean, and there was some talk on here about evaluation, and I think I think the evaluation of quarterbacks, and I think that will be interesting going forward, as a guy that has done a really good job at not only evaluating quarterbacks, but has done a good job of building those guys, is Jeff Lebby. And I think the fact that he's getting some of these quarterbacks. Arch Manning has a really good relationship with Lebby, and that's part of the reason why Oklahoma has offered him. He's got a good relationship with some of these guys that Oklahoma has brought in. Jackson Dart, Chuba Purdy is a couple of guys. Obviously, he had a really good relationship with Dylan Gabriel, and it was almost a no, kind of a no questions asked. In terms of, we got a spot for you. Do you want to come? So I think I think that moving forward will be interesting to see what that looks like, especially as Oklahoma gets some of these young kids in, to see how they develop within the system, within Jeff Lebby's system, because it is a system that has consistently um, produced just astronomical numbers across the college football landscape, whether it be at Baylor where he was there, UCF, Ole Miss for the last couple of years, and you would certainly expect that it would not be much different at Oklahoma.
Weston is looking at the defensive line battle with Jordan Kelly and Isaiah Coe. Coe especially was a huge recruit. Have to fight for a starting spot, bringing in some good defensive linemen.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the goal within this transfer portal, right? I don't think they're trying to necessarily eliminate anyone, but really just bring more of a competition side. And I think one of the things that I had heard when Venables came in was that he had a very established plan in place, what he thought needed to happen to get Oklahoma to the next level, to win a national championship. Not only that, but obviously be able to compete week in and week out on the deep on the in the SEC. So I think part of that is bringing in an infusion of talent on the offense and defensive lines, and you've seen that. Excuse me, you've seen that already, Mark, with the Hawaii transfer that's come, that has that come over from Hawaii to Oklahoma. I believe his name is Jonah Laulau. I'm certain I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but 6'7", 280. So he's a really good kid. Had tons of offers as well, and like I said, there's about 3 or 4 defensive linemen that Oklahoma's in on here in the transfer side, at least that we're just visiting this week. So yeah, I think it's very apparent that that Venables and the staff feels the need to get an infusion of talent on the defensive line as well as the offensive line as well.
Zach is telling us that Colin Cowherd, as I believe his name, is nothing more than, oh, that's not the question. That is a response to, yes, Wes, who says, what do you guys think about the Colin Cowherd? What he had to say about OU coach and that it's a bad hire. I did not hear those comments, and I'm looking for them right here, and I don't see anything online. I don't know if you caught anything.
So I would take anything that Colin Cowherd says with a grain of salt.
Yes, a large dose of salt.
Large dose of salt. Number one, you have to understand he is a big USC guy, right? So he was thrilled to death with Lincoln Riley coming to USC. So I think that part of it has to do with it. And yeah, he's mentioned that about not about Venables not being as big of a hire as Lincoln Riley was. So yeah, like I said, don't put any I don't put any stock into anything Cowherd says. And if you ever listen to him, he goes live with Joel Klatt from time to time, and it's kind of entertaining to see them two go back and forth because you know that you can tell. I mean, obviously they both work for the same station, but Joel Klatt doesn't really, take anything that he has at face value either. So yeah, I don't put much stock into that. I'm as maybe even me personally, maybe even more excited about the hire now than I was when it happened. I thought he was the perfect guy for Oklahoma. Have just been incredibly excited about the staff that he's put together. I think he's made every right move, and I think from what I've heard that they're going to bring in somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 off-field staff to kind of help. And a lot of those, and just so I think most of people know this, but the coaches, there's a certain period where these on-field staff members can't have any contact or coach or do anything with some of these kids, but these off-field guys, they're the coaches when the coaches aren't allowed to be around these kids. So it's really important that you have a good analyst staff. It's really important that you have a really good off-field staff, and I think Oklahoma's built that. Obviously, things will come spring practice and then the fall, but I think Oklahoma fans should be thrilled with everything that Venables has done up to this point.
The other thing about some of these national hosts is that first and foremost, they can't know everything. They can't be informed on everything. So Colin Cowherd spends most of his time talking about the NFL and the NBA. Mm-hmm. So not that he doesn't like college football, doesn't have a right to have an opinion, doesn't have any insight into it, but he just can't be expected. I liken that to Stephen A. Smith, who, he's an NBA guy, first and foremost. I even hear him make ignorant comments about the NFL where he obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. And he's an NBA guy, but, he's on a show and on a series of shows. I believe he still has a radio show. And so he's just going from show to show to show and trying to gobble up as much information as possible to keep himself informed. And it's really a difficult task to be that knowledgeable about everything. I just focus on college football and I can't stay up with everything. So when you're commenting about the NFL for 2 segments and then the NBA and then the NBA and then some kind of boxing thing and then something else, and then all of a sudden you're asked about college football, then the the response is many times generic out of him. But Colin Cowherd, yeah, he seems every time I've heard him speak on college football, it's fairly knowledgeable, but he can only know so much. And again, he's covering everything. So yeah, he and Joel Klatt have some good conversations, and of course,
Mhm.
I've got as much respect for Joel Klatt as just about anybody around.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think, he makes some of the comments that he makes just to get a rise out of people and just
Yeah,
to
that's the
bring
other thing.
viewership to his shows and stuff like that, so, yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but, you gotta understand that he's such a big USC guy, so he's gonna I mean, that's obviously the way he's gonna go with it.